Quite often you see someone saying, well, I can't do green, it's too expensive. It doesn't make any sense to me. There's some element of green building that resonates with every single person and every single project.
I'm John Lewis, and you're listening to 360 Degree City, a podcast where we talk to people who are working to make cities better. Our hope is that after each episode, you'll start to see your own city from a slightly different angle. 360 Degree City is brought to you by the team at Intelligent Futures. We're a team of versatile urban problem solvers, and our aim is to figure out better ways of living together. According to the Canada Green Building Council, buildings generate up to 35% of all greenhouse gases. 35% of landfill waste comes from construction and demolition activities, and up to 70% of municipal water is consumed in and around buildings. With stats like that, it's pretty clear that making buildings greener is key to reducing the environmental impact of our cities. But what do we mean when we talk about making buildings greener? It sounds pretty straightforward, but there's no shortage of systems and terms to navigate. Passive houses, net zero homes, LEED certified buildings, life cycle assessments, energy efficiency, water conservation. And although the technical elements of going green are incredibly important, our guest today suggests that the definition of a green building is personal and individualized.
I'm Matt Grace. I'm the managing principal of Integral Group here in Calgary, and I'm a green building engineer. And we really help people realize their vision of whatever a green building is.
What's your definition of a green building?
I mean, that's really kept me in a job for 25 years. So I'm still not sure I know the answer. I mean, what's really interesting is, you're obviously familiar with the Brundtland definition, and that goes way back to the heart of sustainability. And
can you share that with the folks that are listening?
It's the idea that we have a quality of life now, and we're not compromising the quality of life for future generations, is to paraphrase it. So it's still relatively new, which is why we struggle with the idea of what is green and what is sustainable. And hidden down in the depths of the definition of the Brundtland definition is this idea that it's locally defined. And there was an initiative a few years back, a couple of decades ago, about the local Agenda 21 and locally defining that. And really, that's at the heart of the matter. If you're talking to affluent families in downtown Calgary about what do they mean by a green building or a green city or a green urban environment, we're probably talking about things that might seem like a luxury to a lot of people in the world. We're talking about transit and clean power and engagement, which is close to your subject area, and lack of graffiti and no litter. If you go and you talk to someone who's just been flooded, they probably just want to not be flooded. If you talk to someone who doesn't have clean drinking water or who doesn't have electricity, they'll probably take any form of electricity. So we've got this huge disparity, and you've got to really define what you mean by a green building or a green urban environment or a green community, sustainable. All these words I think are interchangeable. You have to define that for each project and each point in time. And
each context that it all sits in, yeah.
But it also needs to be something that excites the people that are doing this. So quite often you see someone saying, well, I can't do green, it's too expensive. It doesn't make any sense to me. There's some element of green building that resonates with every single person and every single project.
And so what I'm hearing from you is that there's you're not a purist, I guess. Like, this is a specific definition, and unless it meets this, it fails. You're talking about a lot of different factors that contribute to it.
Right.
Yeah.
So I don't know what's important to you in terms of green buildings. Because I don't know what your value base is. I don't know what your budget is. I don't know what your history with different elements are. So for me, I recently moved house, and I'm in Hillhurst now.
We're neighbors.
We're neighbors, yeah. And I was going to put solar panels on my house, and one of the reasons I wanted to move house is because I couldn't fit solar panels on my old house. So that was happening no matter what. That's happening. I also wanted to have more room for bikes, so I could have different options for cycling. That's really important to me. Someone else might really prioritize health, or they might really prioritize the ability to grow their own food. And they might say, well, energy is important, but the number one thing for me is I want to have a local source production. So I need a really big plot of land where I can grow my own vegetables and have chickens and things like that. So I don't think there can be one definition.
Yep.
I think it's really important to identify that. Otherwise, we're going to end up spinning our wheels a lot. Going down paths that don't actually make any sense to the people we're working with.
Yeah, for sure. And so that's really helpful, because I think oftentimes when people talk about green buildings, they just talk about the technical performance of a building envelope, if you will, right?
Absolutely.
And so what you just described is very, very different. Not very different. It would include that, but there's a much broader consideration for the people in it and how they want to live their lives.
Absolutely. I mean, one of my favorite analogies to the green building certification schemes, there are lots out there. There's LEED, and there's Built Green, and there's the Living Building Challenge. Talk about that a little bit in a moment, maybe. And one of my analogies that I quite like is, if you go to university or you go to college and you spend 3 years studying something that you're not really interested in, it doesn't seem like good use of your time. So if you decide you're going to build a community, or you're going to build a new project, new building, and you decide to certify it against a rating system that doesn't provide any value to you, that doesn't resonate with your values, it's probably going to feel a bit hollow.
Right.
So, if you're not interested in ancient history, don't go and spend 3 years studying ancient history. Find the thing that gets you excited. So we really saw that with the Calgary Zoo project.
The Calgary Zoo had an exhibit space modified to welcome the giant pandas for spring of 2018. Matt and his team built the exhibit to accommodate the pandas' specific needs while ensuring it was able to transition to the next species home in a few years.
Which got officially Living Building Challenge Petal certification. And that was a really exciting journey, because it was for the panda passage for the giant pandas.
Yeah.
It's a cool project because we did the first in Alberta to achieve that designation, and it's pandas. So it's good. And I got to go to the zoo for work.
My daughter is excited about that.
Oh, it's great.
Thank you on her behalf.
Oh, no problem. And the pandas love it. And we looked at different options, and we started looking at it early, and we found the Living Building Challenge really did resonate with the zoo, because it's all about regeneration, and it's not about eliminating some of the toxic materials. It's about eliminating all of the toxic materials. And it really got the whole team excited. And once that commitment was made, it really helped the project achieve something that they're very proud of, and it made the space better.
Yeah.
So it was a bit more work, but the value.
But it felt less like work because people were committed to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And everybody got on board with it.
Yeah. So if we take a step back, or 100 steps back, why are green buildings important to the world today?
Oh, well, that is a very good question, John. How long do we have? So there's kind of technical reasons, and there's very personal reasons as well. When you look at everything from the IPCC...
IPCC stands for the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. The IPCC is the United Nations body for assessing the science related to climate change, and was created to provide policymakers with consistent scientific assessments on the issue.
Or from the McKinley study that looked at how we can start to reduce our carbon emissions, the built environment sector is consistently up there as the biggest contribution of greenhouse gas emissions. Studies vary, and by country it varies. It's usually in the around about half. I mean, I've seen some saying as low as 35, some saying as low as over 60. But the built environment is such a big part of our environmental footprint that we have to tackle that. So from a health point of view as well, most of us spend about 90% of our time inside. So if we're putting something just slightly toxic inside, or if the air quality is not quite right, or if there's some contaminant entering our drinking water, for example, or our seating arrangement is causing us just that little bit of eye strain. If you go and you spend 8 hours sitting at your desk, and it's just something not quite right there, and you multiply that by how many hours most people work,
builds up over time pretty quickly.
You're not going to feel good.
Yeah.
The other side of things is that we're really bad at building things, which should be easy. And there's two sides to that. One is we tend to just do what we did the last time. And when we start to design a building or a new community, we tend to pull out, as an industry, we tend to pull out the last set of plans that we had and say, well, what can we improve? And we very rarely say, well, let's have a high performance building. Let's have a healthy building. Let's have a building that starts to contribute to healing the planet. We're very reluctant to do that because it's scary. And then once the buildings are finished and turned over, we're actually terrible at maintaining them. And I think everybody's under the impression that buildings are simple, but they're not. They're dynamic structures that have moving parts, that have interactions with the people inside them, have interactions with the weather, have interactions with the climate. And unless you felt confident, you probably wouldn't lift the hood of your car and start tinkering with the controls and unplugging the engine management system and saying, sure, I'll reset this. I think I'll connect that pipe over there instead. When as you go in any building that's been up for more than a year, you're going to start to find some examples of jerry rigging. You know, doors propped open when they shouldn't be, ceiling tiles popped open, controls misset, wires just pulled out, broom handles in the HVAC ductwork, all sorts of stuff. And we all think we know better than the original designers of the building. So there's really two sides of it. I mean, the rate of renewal of our built environment is minimal. You know, it's a couple of % a year. So we're not going to get to like a greener building stock by just tackling the new buildings. Right. We have to do that. And that's probably easier. But the impact we can have on the existing buildings and the impact they do have on our health, because nobody's really checking that's huge. And that's not really being tackled in any meaningful way.
Yeah, for sure. And it's relatively easy to, if you're starting from zero, to plan for it and build more efficiencies in this building and things. But I can't remember where I saw it, but it's something like, you know, if you project out 30 years, all of the buildings that will exist in 30 years, 80 or 90% of them exist today.
Absolutely.
And just to your point of the regeneration just isn't happening. So,
So the, you know, the big untapped potential for making our built environment better, it's not the likes of me, it's not the likes of you, John. It's actually the plumber you call up.
Yeah.
And it's the drywall guy you've called up, and it's the electrician you call up. You say, I just need to have a light fixture replaced or a fan installed. It's those people that come in and say, well, hang on a minute. Is there something else that we can do to make your building better?
Right.
Because we're doing all these renovations and these upgrades, and it's that intervention. That's one of the big untapped opportunities that I see.
And when you're talking about the need to, the ambition of healing the planet through buildings, so that's a massive scale. That's a long-term thing. And then you've got the technical side of it. Yeah. And then you've got the human side of it, of how, like you said, like how you want to live your life. Yeah. In your conversations, how do those conversations go? I'm sure they're varied, but navigating in between those scales and times and priorities, how can you give us some examples or stories about how that goes for you as someone that's trying to navigate both spaces of the micro, you know, like this building system to let's heal the planet?
Well, we're in a huge state of flux, I think, with the whole awareness of what's happening. And so I feel like I've been gently poking people for the last couple of decades and saying, okay, can we do a little bit better here, and trying to not upset people too much. But now we've got things like the students striking on Fridays, and we've got the furore over the Green New Deal, and we've got the president to the south of us saying that wind turbines cause cancer. And, you know, every day in the news, there's something that you could lose sleep over. And So you've got that huge scale where it's almost like, well, whatever we do is almost, doesn't make any difference. And then you come down to the micro scale and you've got an individual project or you've got someone putting their own money on the line and they need to make a financial case for it. So you're really fighting against this perception that going green may cost more money, and it doesn't always have to, because the thing that you don't put in the building has a zero environmental footprint, and it costs you less.
Right.
So what
would be an example of that for folks?
Well, the classic example is lighting, where we tend to just put too many lights in. The classic example is, like I said, we do what we did last time.
Yep.
When we're trying to lease buildings, there's a tendency to fit them up as well, and then that may just be ripped out. And I've seen that with my own eyes.
Yeah,
I've seen that with my own eyes. A perfectly good flooring put in just to make the space look a little bit nicer for the next tenant. So a lot of it is about perception. We tend to just over-engineer things. So if you're talking about let's just get technical for a second, I guess. Don't want to get too deep, but what we tend to do when we're trying to get a really high performance building is we take the last one we did and we start to modify it.
Okay. Yeah.
So we're taking your mum van and we're trying to turn it into a Formula One car, and you probably won't get there. So what we tend to do is we'll say, well, let's look at the cost of adding some insulation and upgrading the windows and upgrading the insulation in the roof. And then we're never taking anything away. So we're never saying, all right, well, if I get, whereas the conversation needs to be, what performance level do I need to get to with my walls and my windows and my roof so that I can have the smallest possible heating system? And what do I need to do with the design and the orientation and the shading of the building so that I can minimize the cooling system?
Right.
What do I need to do so that I can turn off the bits that are not used? And what do I need to do to simplify it?
That flags for me, like what you're pushing for is simplicity, and the things you don't need shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
And I read a thing recently that talked about, there's the idea of conspicuous consumption. So I'm buying things to look, to show off to the world. And there's this idea of conspicuous conservation, whereas I might approach you as an expert and say, what's the most impactful things I can do? And you tell me, triple glaze the windows, not double glaze, and put more insulation. And I say, to hell with that. I want a solar panel so I can show my neighbors how green I am.
Eco bling.
Ah, nice. I like that. Have you encountered that?
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. But that's fine.
Yeah,
that's fine. If you sit down with a client and you say, what's your objective here? I want the greenest looking building possible, then we're probably going to put solar panels on it. And then, we can work with them to say, well, if you spend this amount on PV solar, if you spend this amount on, this is what you'll get. This is the contribution to your energy bills and to reducing your GHG emissions. Insulation you won't see, but this is, and you can do that. I mean, all the energy modeling tools are there and we use them all the time. So, but to me, that's this whole thing of like, if you can find out what makes someone tingle about going green, what gets them excited. One of my favorite stories from way back. So I've been in Calgary. Calgary's my home now for the last 12 years. And I'm a very proud Canadian and very proud and happy not to be in England at the moment with the politics, but very proud of my heritage. Yeah. And I had the dubious honor of getting a big contract for the armed forces. And they were building new single living accommodation for the active members of the armed forces, because what they were coming back to after being on duty was seen as substandard. And they wanted to have all these places greened up. So I ended up going around quite a bunch of different, armed forces, Army, Navy, and the Air Force. One of the first ones was at the base of the SAS, which is, if that doesn't translate from the UK, it's kind of like the Navy SEALs and the commandos combined. And I was there with the bigwigs from the Army and the Air Force and the Navy and the contractors and the architects and the guy who's running the site, who's an SAS guy, who had served a lot of duty, got injured. This was his retirement job. And I'm the granola around the table, right? I'm getting all the jokes. Yeah, we got some lentils in for you for lunch, and you can't wear sandals when you're on site, and all this I'm the butt of all the jokes. As soon as you got on site, this hardcore ex-SAS guy, when he saw we were alone, he said, "Hey Matt, I planted all these bushes down here. And I saw these different birds came here. Is that good? Will I get recognition for that? Is that a good thing? And then I'm going to plant all these other birds." Turns out he was a raving ecologist and knew every type of bird species on the site and monitored them every day. But he did not want to say this in front of his friends.
Right? Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, I've got a friend here now.
Yeah.
So we kind of built on that, and I had a contact, and that was the thing that got him excited. He didn't really care about energy efficiency or environmentally friendly materials or ratings. He wanted plants on this. So, there's my in.
Yep.
It's like, okay, well, we're going to put these species of plants. We'll do the ecological side. We'll do green landscaping. It all went in.
Wow.
And just had to be patient. And
Yeah.
so everybody's got their in.
Yeah. So you have to be flexible and be listening at all times.
Yeah. I don't think there's a place, if you're trying to be a professional green building engineer, I don't think there's a place or it's particularly helpful to stand up and rant off your pedestal.
Yeah.
We need people to do that.
Yeah.
We need the Greta Thunberg. We need the school children bunking off school and protesting. We need the congresswoman down in the States who's making these fantastic presentations about the Green New Deal. We need those people. But then you also need the likes of us to come in and look like we're one of them and present viable solutions and say, this is how we can do this, and this is how you can get some benefit from it, and this is how we can make it work for your application. And it's nothing to be scared of.
Yeah.
So I'm not really too fussed what someone's motivation is to go green, as long as there's some motivation.
Yeah.
And then we can work with that. So so if you put yourself in an adversarial position and you say, well, unless you're going to be the greenest of green, it doesn't make any difference, and you're going to end up putting people off.
Some people. Yeah.
So that was kind of my personal decision, was to try and help move any type of building or any type of project or any type of built environment as green as they wanted to go, and obviously push them as far as I think I could.
Yeah.
But take the approach of getting on the inside rather than screaming from the outside.
Yeah. We talk about that often in terms of there's a spectrum of action.
Yeah.
And the most helpful thing it probably is to know and be comfortable with where you are on that.
Yeah.
And to not discount
absolutely
the folks that are evangelical about it.
Yeah.
And the folks that are just doing things on the side in the shadows, like your friend at the forces base.
That's fine as well.
Like it requires all of it.
The challenge I really do have is that I think we are basically, by and large, behaving quite stupidly.
Yeah.
And we can change, though. What's interesting for me is that you wouldn't dream of being silent if you saw a friend smoking with their children in the back of the car. You wouldn't dream of not speaking up if you saw a friend driving without a seatbelt.
Yeah.
But we still will be silent if we see someone idling their car at the side of the road when they're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
We'll still be silent if we know a friend or a neighbor is driving 3 blocks to the shops when they don't need to.
Yeah.
So it's almost like we need to elevate that conversation that we have successfully applied to things like, littering and smoking in front of children.
For sure.
And we need to apply that to kind of a wider impact of why you behaving in a way that is negatively impacting the planet. So it's almost like we need to elevate that consciousness where it's okay. So one of the games I do like to play is, if I'm not in a hurry and I see someone drop litter in front of me, I'll pick it up and I tap them on the shoulder and I say, "Excuse me, you've dropped something. I didn't know if it was important." And it's fantastic. I only do it if I'm in the right mood, but it's very entertaining, and I'd encourage you that you try it. Smokers are the worst.
Yeah.
You're like, "Oh, there's a garbage can over there. Would you like me to put it?" The look on their face is terrible.
Yeah.
It's hilarious. And I do it with a smile, and having the plumbing English accent probably helps. So we almost need to get to that mindset where we're saying, it's okay to walk up to someone and say, do you mind not idling your car outside my house? Do you mind?
Yeah.
What's going on here?
Yeah. It's this combination of actual facts and knowledge. So people are aware of it, because sometimes that's not the case. And then storytelling and impact, and then behavior change. And there's all kinds of things. When we were working on the environmental master plan in Banff, we were talking about idling, and that's in the plan eventually. And folks that we talked to, they're like, well, in the middle of the winter when it's minus 30 degrees Celsius, I need to warm up my car. And then so we're like, well, there's actually all kinds of studies that show 30 seconds is all the modern engine needs. You're actually doing damage if you leave it there for 15 minutes. Yeah. What you're doing is making yourself more comfortable inside, but the engine doesn't need it. And so don't, and like people legitimately we talked to didn't know that. Yeah. And so it's like, oh, okay, now I know. Thank you. And so you try and get those things called facts.
And that's very relevant. So if someone suffers extreme pain in the cold, then maybe that's okay. Yeah. And that's what you've encapsulated there, John, is really one of the nice challenges when you come to the whole world of green buildings. So if you're going to have a green building, a sustainable building, you're trying to balance consumption against what the building's trying to do. So if someone needs a particular amount of light because they're a bit older, maybe they're doing detailed work, you could save energy, you could turn the lights off. But if they can't function, then it's not a green building. I worked with a brilliant guy when I was at the building research establishment, and he talked a lot about fitness for purpose.
Fitness for purpose.
Fitness for purpose. Yeah. And that's absolutely huge in in everything to do with sustainability. If something's not doing the job it's intended to, it's not fit for purpose. Right. And it's not going to be sustainable. So if our guilty secret is I bought John a coffee and I forgot my travel mug, so we're both using disposable mugs here. If we found a way of making this travel mug, out of some super green, locally made, compostable rice paper, and the coffee's dribbling, maybe that's possible, and the coffee's dribbling down my arm, it's not fit for purpose, it's not doing the job, that cannot be sustainable. Yep. And it's okay to experiment. When I was doing an office renovation for myself, I researched there was a milk-based paint product. I was like, well, I got to try this, because the environmental footprint was really low. It was rubbish. Yeah. It was absolutely terrible. Yeah. And we had to scrape it off and start again. And I was fine to test it out because it was out of my budget, and that was fine. Yeah. But that's another thing that we need to look at is we can put in products, but they have to be doing the intended job. And that's something you need to bear in mind. So, if someone's driving a larger vehicle, maybe they need that larger vehicle for what they're doing. In my opinion, going green is not about taking away; it's about finding the optimum way of achieving what you need to do.
In your opinion, is there a particular city, country, jurisdiction that's really doing the best, or that's exemplary in green buildings, encouraging, executing, thinking about them?
I mean, the two cities I've lived in most are London in England and Calgary. And the idea, every city is a living and dynamic organism by nature. It has to be. Yep. And we kind of touched on the individual choices. I mean, Calgary has been a real leader in green buildings. It was, I think, the first in North America to have a formal green building certification process. We buy all our green power for the transit comes from all the wind turbines down in Pincher Creek. But I would kind of almost come back to that earlier conversation. So I think it's a more micro scale on what makes a city kind of green and livable. Yep. It depends on your individual choices, and what's happening in the wider city is important, and it does get you excited. But it's it's your daily boring routines that makes a city green or not. Yeah. So you can live in a really big urban sprawl, but if your daily routine is walking to the ice cream shop every day and walking to the park with your kids, and you can do that, then you can live a very green lifestyle. So I think we tend to look at it on too big a scale when we're saying, what is a city green? Is it livable? Is it sustainable?
Okay.
I think it comes down to what can that individual do? And how can you do your boring, mundane stuff on a day-to-day basis?
Okay.
And that's where it comes down to the individual lifestyles. So if you're living right in the middle of a city with lots of green buildings, but you're riding 3 hours on a transit every day, which happens. So I was just down a couple of weeks ago at a conference at Berkeley. I always say that wrong. I always try to say that in a very English accent. Berkeley, I have to say it right. On the Center for the Built Environment, and they've got huge environmental achievements as a city. They've got very stringent goals. They've got real advanced approach to greening up buildings. You talk to a lot of the people kind of in the 20s, in that generation, they're all coming out from miles away because they can't afford to live in the downtown.
Okay. Yeah.
So sure, they're working in the downtown, but then they have to live out in the burbs, and people are driving down 8-lane highways because they can't afford to live near where they work. So that's, on the face of it, a very sustainable city, but for the individuals, I'm wondering what their lives are like.
Yeah,
having just been a visitor there.
Yeah, right.
So for me, it's about what that individual person or what that family, what that block level community is experiencing. Yeah. Can you position yourself where you can execute most of your tasks without unnecessary consumption?
Yeah. Okay. So it's a great non-answer.
Great non-answer. Sure, I specialize in those.
I'm just messing with you.
That's all right.
No, I think it's I appreciate the because oftentimes when folks are specialists, and maybe it's the fact that you're a specialist generalist, as you described.
I'm a specialist generalist.
The fact that context gets ignored.
Context gets ignored.
The more you specialize. So that's a refreshing approach, that you understand the context that these buildings that you work on exist in. What
we didn't talk about is the whole idea of net zero buildings.
Yeah.
We haven't even touched on that, which we should have done. So we have to work this in. So the way the whole industry is going, and it has to go, is towards net zero buildings.
Explain what that is.
Even that has different definitions.
Yeah.
There's an official certification from the Green Building Council of Canada, which has a very precise definition of a net zero energy building, net zero carbon building. The broadest definition is a building that generates as much energy as it consumes over a year. What's interesting, if you go down south of the border and you say net zero, they usually interpret that as meaning net zero energy, net zero water, net zero waste.
Oh.
All three. So again, it's local context. So there are no technological barriers to having a building that is net zero energy. So we can have buildings that don't consume any energy. The context is, if I take that building and I put it in the middle of nowhere, I'm having people travel by single occupancy vehicle, or it doesn't get used, it doesn't get occupied, then it comes back to this idea of fit for purpose. It's not fit for purpose. So that's why it's so contextual for me. There's a lot of very good buildings, but they're not set in that urban context.
Yeah, right.
So they're not adding to the urban fabric. They're not adding to the concept of a living city.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I think that's the perfect example, right? You could have a LEED platinum, or you could have a net zero, and if it's in the middle of a place that doesn't have transit and it's only no other uses around it, say it's an office building, nothing, and everyone drives to and from, and and it kind of defeats the global purpose.
I mean, LEED has actually addressed that very nicely, and everybody loves to hate LEED, but it has changed the construction industry for the better. Things that are now standard practice in terms of green performance that weren't 10 years ago have changed because of LEED, but there is actually quite a strong emphasis on the location side of LEED. So to achieve LEED Gold on an industrial park is a really tough achievement. To achieve LEED Gold on a downtown recreational facility, it's not quite so challenging.
Yeah.
So it actually does quite a good job of recognizing that. The importance of the location and the density and the urban fabric.
Right. Okay, so I'll ask you one final question that we ask everybody.
Okay.
Can you tell me a city that you love and why you love it?
Oh, I love Calgary.
Why do you love it?
I love Calgary because it can be whatever you want in Calgary. You can make what you want of it. So for me, I live and work downtown. I bike to almost all my meetings. It's clean. It's got fantastic parks. It's generally clean and tidy. And it's a slight irony doing what I do in a hub of oil and gas, but you can actually live a really, really green lifestyle if you want to in Calgary, and if you want your 6,000 square foot McMansion with the triple garage, you can have that as well. There's space for everybody, and when you want to get out of the city, it's so accessible to the mountains. So I'm really happy to be a Calgarian. And I love the space. I love what we have. I love the can-do attitude.
Great.
I wouldn't want to be anywhere else.
I really appreciate Matt's optimism about the importance of individual action when becoming more sustainable. There's no question that systems change is necessary, but our individual choices about where we live, how we get to work, what we eat and what we buy are key to help us reduce our individual impact and push for those shifts in our city systems. 360 Degree City is created by our team at Intelligent Futures. To learn more about the work we do, go to intelligentfutures.ca. I'm John Lewis. Thanks for stopping by.